very simple reason, which is I believe the government of the United States is completely broken. I believe it's been purchased by corporations. I don't believe it serves the people of the United States. And of all the policies that people are talking about that I know everybody in the United States wants, I'm sure everybody in this room wants, things like health care as a right for every American, the kind of education that young people deserve from pre-K through college, a living wage for working people, a redistribution of how the income is spent, a guarantee of clean air and clean water. I was listening to the debates and people were talking about those policies, and I felt like no one was telling the truth, which is we can't get those policies until we break the corporate stranglehold that's killing our democracy.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up right in the middle of New York City.
New York City.
Yeah.
Where did you go to school?
I went to Yale University. I went to college at Yale, and then I went to grad school. I moved out west to go to grad school, and I went to Stanford University for grad school.
Did you always have money?
My grandfather in New York was a plumber. My father was the first generation to go to college in his family. He became a lawyer. My mom was a school teacher in New York, in the public schools, and she taught at the Brooklyn House of Detention. So in effect, I really did. I had two employed parents my life, and they took incredible care of me. I never inherited a dime, but I got a great education and my parents took care of me. I knew every single night where I was going to eat dinner. I might argue with my mom about what was for dinner, but I knew we were having dinner. And I knew who was going to put me to bed and read me a story and say prayers with me every single night. And I think...
Let me ask you, how did you make so much money so fast?
So, the way that I started a business in the beginning of 1986, by myself, one room, no employees, no windows in the room. And I basically invested money for college endowments and foundations. They have, they save up their money and then they invest it and then they use the earnings from their investments to run their schools and their foundations. And basically what happened was, over time, they came to trust me, so I built a pretty big business. I built a multi-billion-dollar international business from that little room. Because over time, people came to trust me and gave me their money because they thought that I would be responsible and get them good returns in a way that wouldn't embarrass them.
So if you win, you receive your tax returns?
Excuse me? I've already released my tax returns.
So you receive how much money?
Excuse me?
You get how much money?
I think that Forbes magazine said that I was worth $1.6 billion.
Ooh. I'm working because why would you think what you're doing in the comfort zone? You risk running the president. What happened to you?
Why am I different from Donald John Trump?
Yeah.
I believe myself to be different from Donald John Trump in every single way, other than having 2 eyes, 2 ears, and nose and a mouth. Look, I came from a family that, had deep values. My dad quit his law job to go in the Navy in World War II, and he prosecuted the Nazis in Nuremberg. My mom was a total inspiration to me in terms of her values, in terms of her faith, in terms of what she stood up for and what she fought for her whole life. And so they believe you give back more than you get. And I think everybody in my family knew that we've been very lucky to be born in the United States, that we had privilege and that we owed back. And that's why, honestly, I walked away from my business. I took the giving pledge to give over half my assets away to good causes while I was alive. And I spent the last 10 years working to organize coalitions of ordinary American citizens to beat the corporations at their own game.
When you start doing this, why America had to impeach Trump? When you start that?
I started it, I started the need to impeach campaign 2 years ago, October 20, 2017. And there's a direct line for me between my father prosecuting the Nazis and me starting the need to impeach program.
All right.
Because, Reverend Jackson, my father didn't talk that much, but I asked him, when the last Nazi came out of Landau prison in 1970, I asked my father if he interviewed me. He said, I interviewed all the top Nazis. And I said, this Nazi was a guy who got a pretty good press report, believe it or not, in 1970. He'd been to college, unlike a lot of the Nazis. He wasn't as much of a street thug. And I said to my father, is there any truth to this story? He said, he's the good Nazi the way the press is portraying him. And my father said, Tom, there are no good Nazis. When you see something wrong at the heart of your society, you fight it every day. That's the story about the Nazis. And that's what I saw at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. I saw evil at the center of America. And that was the point of impeachment.
Rob just said it was not often we speak with language, glowing terms. It's all building bright lights, drugs, sex, and all that. There's 5% of the population, something about it can't vote. What would you do to rule those about?
Look, I thought that was, let me just say, I had not heard that statistic before today, Reverend Jackson. That statistic killed me. That was a chilling, horrible statistic. Look, what I'm talking about...
Charlotte.
Yes.
The Carolina Panthers, another family, we saw the high stuff, but on the bottom, it's just a track of population.
So, let me say that my economic plan is, and we're going to talk about one of these, is basically break the corporate stranglehold on America, invest in the people of America, harness our competition and innovation. So when I hear a statistic, and I just want to repeat the statistic that Reverend Jackson was referring to, which is only 1 out of 20 people in Atlanta who are born into poverty move out of poverty. Only 1 out of 20.
What?
Yeah, that's why it's absolutely chilling.
Gee.
And I said, and so what I'm saying is, my belief is this room, we are America. Americans are America.
Yes.
America succeeds when the American people succeed. And that's why I said we invest in people. If you look at Mr. Trump's budget, every single program that involves supporting human beings, he tries to cover. Every single one. He cuts education, he cuts health, he cuts every program that could possibly help a human being. And every program that involves a man holding a gun, he tries to build up. So when I think about how we change that statistic of people not being in, then it's across the board invest in the American people.
You're going to say for the next debate. What will that debate be?
It's going to be next Tuesday, October 15th.
What will it be?
It's going to be in Columbus.
What point will you be trying to make?
The point that I will be trying to make is this. If we can break, look, the corporations have bought the government. There's a reason the government's broken. They like it that way. Yeah. We have to break their stranglehold on the democracy. But if we do, we can guarantee a level of support and a standard of living for every single American that people don't realize we have in our capabilities. You know, if we're going to talk about education for a second, my brother's been an advocate for at-risk youth for his entire career. I know that starting early, that pre-K, all those programs are incredibly important. And it never stops. You know, I always say to people, if a kid in Compton, California gets a good education, is supported, becomes a productive person and a good citizen, that is a fantastic thing for the people in Atlanta, Georgia. It's fantastic for the people in Kentucky and Maine and Alaska. That makes America stronger. That helps every single person in this country. And I believe we have to break this system that we have that is basically starving the people of America to feed the profit lines of American corporations.
Racism has turned a little more poverty. Basically because poor white people fight the right to be poor. Georgia, North Carolina, South, they fight against Medicaid. This state turned to $10 billion, $6,000 for Medicaid. How do you see that in the Medicaid system? Did they die in waiting rooms, emergency rooms, because they don't have basic care?
Look, when I look, and I'm not sure if I'm going to answer this question appropriately, Reverend Jackson, so if I miss your point, let's ask it again. Look, I look at our medical care system, and it is a cost crisis. It's crushing everyone, but because it's so expensive, it's an availability crisis. There are tens of millions of Americans who aren't covered, but for everyone who is covered, it's chewing up all of their income. And we pay twice as much as any other country for our health care. And that's deliberate. You think the corporations love that. They're getting paid twice as much. There is a law on the books that the American government cannot negotiate drug prices with drug companies.
What does that mean?
That means that they can set their price. That the government on Medicare and Medicaid does not negotiate prices. We pay 10 times what Canadians pay for insulin. 10 times. That is a drug that was invented in 1930. There are 25 million diabetics in the United States of America. Not only do we pay 10 times as much, it's illegal to go to Canada to buy the drug. The drug companies wrote that law. We are at the mercy, and I do want to get to the point about race. I'm not trying to skip that point, but I'm just making a point about what's going on in this country. If you're a drug company, charging us 10 times what Canadians get charged is great. That's money in your pocket. It's a lot of it. But that's what.
I've heard something about race, not exactly. Whites become so sick with racism, they'll vote against their own interests. They're blacks.
Why?
In the Reconstruction legislation, blacks went to Congress. 3 million blacks that literally couldn't read and write. A national plan in medical care for everybody. There's a bit more whites than more than blacks. Whites voted against Medicare for everybody, plus blacks. Today, some of the people are wherever I want, Obamacare, I don't Obamacare. So Obamacare is
affordable health care.
You never allow this as a racist label. People in Kentucky, I'm with you, I need mammograms and all that. I want Obamacare. They've been turned against health care because of the black label on it. What Lyndon Johnson did, this is last time, he went to Appalachian, University of Ohio, and he kept the wall popping. If he didn't keep the wall popping in Holland, so he was trying to please out of power. When he ran to white, poor people, and lost all power, and then everybody. You see working some in that Appalachian, because when whites want health care, we'll get it to everybody.
Can I comment on that, Reverend?
Go for it.
So I have a belief which is consistent with what Reverend Jackson was talking about in terms of high school seniors and people awaiting trial. And that's, I've always believed that the Democratic Party focuses way too much on what they think of as the swing voter, the 2% of Americans who can't decide whether they like Trump or not. And I've always believed that there's 50% of American citizens who don't vote because they think the system is broken. And every one of those people is a Democrat. And I've always felt like, rather than trying to appeal to that 2% who can't make up their mind, which means not being bold, not being a truth teller, trying to convince people who are on the edge, really that hillbilly elegy story that came out after the 2016 election, I've always felt like, let's go get the 50% of Americans who think the system doesn't work and they don't want to participate because they think no one tells the truth. That's a bunch of young people, and I started an organization called Next Gen America, that did the largest youth voter mobilization in American history last year. Let's get the young people, let's get the black and brown people, let's get the people who think the system is broken, make sure they're registered, make sure that they understand how important their vote is and their voice is, and let's win everything. That's all.
South Carolina is in play in the media now. 250,000 blacks in that state unregistered. What would we do to help register 250,000 blacks in South Carolina specifically?
So let me say this. In 2016, Next Gen America, with its partners around the country, registered 1.3 million people. And we did it by going, you can't show up in a community, in my experience, and tell people before an election, I'm here to help you, now will you do something for me? You have to work with the people who have been working in the community for a long time. And so at Next Gen, when we go into a community, we stay. So we've been in a bunch of places for 7 years. In South Carolina, I think in order to register those people, you'd have to do what Stacey Abrams did in Georgia, which is be organized at the community level, do the door-to-door work, do it in high schools, register the high school seniors, just as you were saying, go into the communities where people are under-registered as in partnership with the existing institutions that have been working there for a long time. When we did it, we registered 800,000 people in California in 2016. Our largest partner was the African American Registration, Education, and Participation Project. But in every community, we went in with people who'd been there for years, and we worked together to develop a plan, and then we monitored it, and we supported them, and we adapted if things weren't working.
What would help us is thousands of those in jail, pre-trial detention, eligible to vote, who need to vote, and precincts in those jails. What do you think? When you do your debate next Tuesday, you bring up down the register inmates and put precincts in the sessions.
Look, I think those are obviously votes that should be gotten. Let me say this. In California, Next Gen worked for 2 years, and I personally worked for 2 years, to get rid of money bail, to get rid of cash bail. That's a system where it's inherently discriminatory. If someone can go to jail for months without being convicted of a crime, and someone who can make bail, who has the money to be able to afford bail, doesn't have to go to jail, that changes lives. And we worked really hard to get rid of it. I know that it doesn't explicitly mention race, but it's absolutely discriminatory violence.
One of the challenges we have today, when you go south, in the South, with discourse targeted and racially isolated. Commitment to register those in jail, precincts will have an impact immediately.
Look, not only do I believe in registering the pre-trial, the people awaiting trial, we worked really hard in Florida on that law to make sure that people who come out of jail and pay their debt to society had their voting rights restored. That is something across America which is absolutely right, but which is only partially done, and isn't really fully done in Florida, even though that proposition passed in 2018.
You were running before the campaign started. If you don't remember, you keep running. You were running before the campaign started.
Yes.
If you don't remember, you keep running or working, should I say?
Absolutely. Look, I guarantee that all of the grassroots work that we would have done if I weren't running for president will continue. So I've said it's not either or, it's both. And let me say this. Reverend Jackson ran for president. He was running hard before he ran for president. He was running hard while he ran for president, and he's been running hard ever since. That is an example of which I firmly hope I
the poverty base is more white than black, more white, black, and brown. What's your plan to revive the war of poverty?
Yes. My thesis on this is, if we break, well, let's start back to 1980. I think we took a horrible wrong turn as a country in 1980 under Ronald Reagan. I think if you look and see, he had a program based on lies that he was very effective at selling, and we've been suffering under it ever since. And the proof is that 90% of Americans haven't had a raise in 40 years, if you take into account the cost of healthcare, of rent, and of education. So to me, breaking that Reagan story and breaking the corporate control of our government, when we talk about people across America, I believe that we go after every single part of the Reagan legacy. I mean, that means healthcare is a right. It means the kind of education that Americans deserve. But it also means there has been a 40-year successful, concerted, organized campaign against working people. It's gone against specifically labor unions, but it's attacked the rights of working people. And you can see that all of the increased income in the United States for 40 years has gone to the richest Americans. For 40 years, it is amazing to see the numbers. So when you ask me what am I going to do, we're going to have to undo 40 years of corporate control, taking all the money from the other 90-95% of Americans.
What we're concerned about now is that,
excuse me?
what we're concerned about now is a bad base of what we're doing. We're homeless, we work and can't get paid, we work against insurance, school, healthcare. So it's short of bragging about how much we're working. What was missing in his analysis?
That is it. I think what you just said is exactly right. People in politics keep talking about job-creating businesses. We have very low unemployment in the United States right now. The problem is you can't live on those jobs. You're talking about people who are homeless because they can't afford rent. People have 2 to 3 jobs. We have a gigantic wage crisis. We have a gigantic healthcare cost crisis. But there is absolute inequity in how people are getting paid. So that means minimum wage. It means there's a whole bunch of things that have to change.
Minimum wage should be what?
Look, it's got to be at least, I've been fighting for $15 for years, but in a lot of the United States, it's not enough. I mean, when I think about the minimum wage, $15 in parts of the United States is a living, I really think about living wage, not minimum wage. But I think when you look, I think it should be indexed to the cost of rent.
Yeah.
Because there are places, I live in California, $15 in San Francisco, California is not a living wage. And we can see, but it's more than that. We can see, I'll give you a statistic that to me says a lot. In 1980, the CEOs of the top companies made something like 25 to 30 times the average wage in their companies. Today, it's somewhere between 250 and 300 times. It's just changed, and it can't continue. So the minimum wage is a start, Reverend Jackson. But there's so much inequality here in terms of income, and we've got to go after that. There's also even much worse inequality in terms of assets. You know, one of the...
How restrain the whole corporate inequality? And that backbone is what has been successful with what we are now, right?
Yes. So, look, I think there are 3 things we need to do to break this corporate ownership of our government. I think one is to call it out in this campaign and have people hear it and agree together that this is the first task. We really aren't getting any of those healthcare proposals as long as the drug companies and the insurance companies and the monopoly hospitals are in control. So first, call it out and say it's job one. Second, there are some things the president can do based on the existing institutions in Washington, like the Federal Election Commission, where we can get transparency in giving and fine people really dramatically if they're cheating, which there's tons of dark money cheating in terms of elections. But the third thing is this: I propose structural change in the United States, which I believe we need. I've talked about term limits in Congress of 12 years for Congress people and senators. And I know that makes people in Washington, D.C. very uncomfortable. but I think it's way overdue. I've talked about a national referendum, that if Congress won't pass something that people really want, that we can put it on the ballot. 26 states do this, and the people can pass their own laws. Get rid of the monopoly Congress has on legislation.
How do you reverse the narrative of white fear? And for example, your unemployment among blacks hurts whites. The more blacks can't purchase, and invest, can't grow. Those who do have to pay for those who don't, right? Well, what is good to begin to educate whites as to the cost of racist behavior, the cost of...
You know, you would be, I believe, Reverend Jackson, much smarter on this. I'm going to answer the question in my way, but I'm going to defer to you on this. But I'd say this. What I want to say to white people about race is this. We're going to guarantee support for your family too. Because what Mr. Trump is saying is that anything that anybody else gets comes out of your pocket. And so you have to be fighting all these people who you're suspicious of because everything they get comes from you and your kids. And I want to say, no, everybody's going to get health care and education and a living wage and clean air and clean water. So just cut it out. They're not taking anything from you. You got what you're worried about. What we're talking about here is we can guarantee your security. Their security doesn't come out of your pocket. It comes out of the rich people and the corporations who've been getting a break for 40 years.
What would you convince working class white people to change? See, the North South Carolina about what the black vote do. The white vote holds Medicaid down.
Yeah.
And wait. What would you do about this? White people make sense?
I spent 30 years in the private sector. I think people in the United States worry about prosperity. And I believe the only thing you can say is what I'm saying, which is, we're going to be prosperous. This is going to work. You're going to be supported. But Reverend Jackson, in all sincerity, I don't want to chase those. I believe we're going to win by getting the 50% of Americans who don't vote or Republicans. And I believe in my heart that if we do our job on registration and turnout, that we're going to sweep. I think these Republicans have lost all moral and intellectual credibility. And I feel like I'm going to propose something extremely optimistic and positive that I totally believe in. And I think really it's going to be an attempt to strike at their fear and say to them, you too can expect an optimistic, positive America. But they're not going to be in control. I think Republicans are going to be worried in 2020 that they're going to lose white hegemony forever. And you want to know something? They are. And that's the Republican Party's great fear. And they should be scared. And they are going to lose.
The point is the focus on blacks, racial vote, blacks vote. It says the plan to address the basic undocumented whites in South Carolina. Undocumented whites in South Carolina.
Look, the only thing I can say is this. I believe, I spent 30 years figuring out what creates prosperity in an economy, in a community, in an industry, in a business. And I believe I can say with credibility, we can create broad-based prosperity and take care of your family. That doesn't mean we're going to do that for every single person in the United States, including you. I believe they're acting out of both fear and a sense of the government not caring about them. You know, they're part of the group of people who believe that the government's been bought by corporations and doesn't care about them. That was Trump's message. Remember that, drain the swamp? Drain the swamp was basically, no one loves you, no one respects you, I'll fight for you. They are hurt, and I believe the answer is we're going to have broad-based prosperity, including you, but not exclusively you, and everybody else's prosperity is going to happen, not hurting you.
summer's full of goldfish, you put alligators in the pond. And you immerse that in one's in. My last point really would be, what would be your vision on war on poverty?
The war on poverty, a moral imperative for America. You know, if you think about faith, if you think about responsibility as someone who believes in God and wants to have a meaningful life on earth, taking care of the most vulnerable amongst us, supporting them is at the heart of that mission. This government has got to be looking. The number of people in poverty, I think, is way underestimated. And I believe supporting those people across the board, including education, but also specifically including housing. I am not, I think we've spent 40 years watching these market-based solutions, market-based credit, tax credits for housing, different ideas about the environment, all based on market-based solutions. Honestly, I believe in rules. I believe in government action with money, not in tax credits. I'm a believer that we're way overdue for the government spending money and taking rules to support the people of the United States to invest in their future.
What would real war on poverty look like?
Well, I think it would start, I think it would go through every single part of a person's life. So, it includes education, where there's more money spread more equally, supporting teachers to have, starting in pre-K and going through college. Housing has got to be at the center of it, because where you put your head down in life determines so much about your life. It determines where your kids go to school. We're just seeing it determines where you get to shop, what food is in the grocery store. It determines the air and water you breathe. We have to have a massive low-income housing program in the United States because it's a crisis. It's a homelessness crisis, and it goes beyond that in terms of what the choices people are forced to make on housing because of cost.
We've been a lot about trade skill development. What would be increase trade skill development among young blacks and browns?
So, I know that not everybody in this world wants to go to college. A lot of people want to have a good, high-skilled, high-paid job. In California, what we've done on that is we have 2.2 million people in California right now going to 2-year junior colleges. That's a place where people get a chance, not just to study and maybe move on to a 4-year college, but also to get direct trade experience. So as far as I'm concerned, the point of that trade school is to make sure it's available for free in terms of the existing educational system, but as much as possible to work with businesses and unions to get people skills and get them directly into actual real jobs.
You'll be on the debate next Wednesday again. What would be your attempt to get recognition on that debate series? What would you try to say?
I honestly think that the number one thing that I'm going to say that's different is that all of the policies that we care about, all of the policies you guys want to talk about, are not going to happen until we break this corporate stranglehold. That's my first point. And second of all, none of you guys want to actually deal with our climate crisis, but we have a climate crisis that's real, and we have to deal with it in real time, and it's a perfect example that the health and safety of American citizens is threatened across the board, and the oil and gas companies have stopped us from doing anything about it. So from my standpoint, we're going to have to break it. I think this is emblematic of both those points. I have 4 kids, 31, 29, 27, 25, 3 boys and a girl. And 3 weeks ago, my daughter called me up in tears, 27 years old, and said, I'm just worried we're going to lose it, that we're going to lose the world, that we aren't going to be able to win, and that there isn't enough political will to do what we have to do. And I said, honey, you're wrong. We're going to win. We're going to take these people down.
Yeah. You think there's a will in Washington to impeach Trump instead of home? There's a will in Washington to impeach Trump instead of home.
Let me say this. I don't right now But I think the way, my belief in this, always, Reverend Jackson, has been that it's been a question of the American people. If you think about those Republicans, he's going to get impeached. But we need 20 Republicans to vote to remove him. And I think if you look at those Republicans, if 65% of their constituents say to them, you get rid of him or we'll get rid of them, or of you, they're going to figure out in a New York minute that they never liked Mr. Trump. And so to me the question is, if the American people see the evidence, and yesterday 51% of Americans for the first time said they want him impeached and thrown out of office. But if that number gets to a higher number, which I believe it will because he's so guilty, that if it gets to a point that all of those senators are going to look at themselves and go, it's him or me, and I know it ain't going to be me.
But there's two questions. One's called, one if you'll be on the stage Tuesday, if you are able to make an dent in the numbers, you go forward. If you don't make a dent, would you drop out?
Well, let me say this. I don't think a lot of people in America know who I am. And I've spent I'm the last person I think to join this race. I spent the last 3 months pretty much in the 4 early primary states, which are Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and Nevada. And they actually poll in those states, just those 4 states. There's a poll. And in those states, I'm in 4th place. So on a national basis, I don't think people in North Dakota, maybe people in Georgia, maybe people in New Jersey know who I am.
You really know South Carolina and Georgia. And I was really right. South Carolina, Georgia, and Buffalo. Those 3 states.
Well, I think what I'm thinking is this, and obviously this is something you might know better than I would. I think that what happens in those early states becomes the story for all the next states. And if you do well in those states, then you get a ton of coverage, and then all of a sudden people take you seriously.
If you didn't realize your dream and didn't who would be your number 2 person? You'd be in line of support.
So if I don't make it.
Yeah, who would be the 11 you got in that? If you were to lose or shoot up, who would be in line of support the number 2?
I don't know. I can tell you this. The person who, if he'd run, I wouldn't have run, who chose not to run was Deval Patrick. The person who I thought, if he'd run, I would have felt like there's no need for me to do this, would have been Deval.
Let us stand. Put the hand together for please hear it. They will be envelopes.
She's got the envelopes. She's coming in with envelopes. If you want an envelope, please raise your hand. She's in the very back. She'll bring it to you.
Accept. Don't pass it out, please. You will join me, push it. Ken Warren, push it. Raise your hand right now. So, raise your hand. She's passing out.
Please raise your hands and take an envelope, please. Please.
Fill it up and out today.
And if those of you would like to join the organization, you can do so at registration also. Thank you very much. Please raise your hand. We're trying to get workshops.
2 sessions.
We have 2 sessions going on after this. Supplier diversity session. We have a number of companies there to talk about contracts. Level 3, 2 levels down. And we have Dennis here to talk about franchise opportunities. And the H.J. Russell Innovative Enterprise Group is here to talk about an entrepreneur program that they have in that same session, beginning immediately, at 4 o'clock. That one's at 4 o'clock. And I got this.
Reverend Lewis, you done so much work for us growing in Birmingham. Force of justice and good. That's a prayer, please, sir.
Before he gives the prayer, we have one honoree. We must get this award. And I have to say to all of our sponsors, is any sponsors still here? I know some had to leave. Would you please raise your hands if you're sponsors? I see Home Depot is still here, Nationwide and others. Thank you all for your support and your sponsorship. Thank you very much, SunTrust. Very quickly, I have to acknowledge the advisory committee. If your advisory committee, please raise your hand. Those advisory committee members, there's only 2 people in our office, whereas one time we had 5 or 6. Trina Heatherton, raise your hand, please. If it was not for our advisory committee, Tina Jones, Stefan, Kimberly Starks, Bunny Ransom, and Dr. Rob, we could not have made this a successful event. Please, if you will, give them a round of applause. Thank you. Our last and final honoree, this gentleman has really helped me. Pretty much every day, 2 or 3, 5, 6 times a day, we would have a conversation about the flow of this conference to make sure it was subtle. He is a businessman. He has given unselfishly of his time. We want to honor this gentleman, Mr. Stefan Gresham. Please give it up for him. Entrepreneur of the Year. Let's give it up to Mr. Stefan Gresham.
Stefan is a member of the Russell family. He's been faithful across the years. Thank you for your service and your continued service. Big hand for Stefan Gresham.
You want to come in front. Okay. All right.
All clergy move this way while we're taking this picture. All clergy, this is our last picture. We must move. If you expedite all clergy, come to the podium, please.
Thanks for your mama. Come up,
My mom, would you please come up, mother? All clergy, please come up.
Good. Let's get this ready.
All clergy, come to the podium.
All right. Let me get this right quick. All right, here I go. Thank you.
All clergy, please come up.
Yeah, what you want? Yeah, I got it.
What I'm gonna do? Huh? All right. Yeah, fine. Okay, now we need all the clergy. Everybody get up there.
All of the clergy, please come on up to the podium. We're going to take this picture. Clergy. Come on, boy, my brothers.
All right, actually, get them all together. Give me all the characters. Come on, play right now. All right, come on here. All right, Warlock brother.
Go out in front.
All right, can everybody see me? Right. Thank you.
Brother Tucker Lewis did us in prayer.
All right, ho.
Wait.
Prayer. No, go. You good. Go ahead.
Pray time.
Let us pray. Eternal God, our Father, we're grateful for this time that we've been able to spend together in fellowship with food and our faith. We thank you for Reverend Jackson. Continue to fortify him, be with him. But most of all, we thank you for the promises of prayer. We thank you gratefully for the provisions of prayer. Be with us now. In Jesus' name we pray. Those of you that will covenant with this prayer, but simply say amen.
Amen.
By the way, Jesse Norman funeral is tomorrow at 1 o'clock in Augusta, Georgia. Famous Albert Center. We'll be in Rockville, South Carolina, Saturday. We'll be in WCP.
I see you. They got a I think I took one with him by yourself before this. So I got you got my number.
I got you.
Okay.